Have you ever been to a restaurant and you order the duck and it's like $20, $30, $40, $50 and you just get like one duck breast? Sometimes a lot of the cost translates to the duck was dry aged. So that involves bringing in fresh ducks, throwing in a fridge or an aging cabinet. So a lot of that cost for storage and holding it gets passed on to you. Now at the time of recording this, I got those ducks for $30 each from a farm here where I live in California. But check your local area, there might be a duck farm. And the fresher, the better for this. I wouldn't really dry age a duck that's been in the freezer. It's actually one of the easiest dry ages that you can do at home. I have a special fridge for dry aging because I do beef, but you don't need that. You can just use your home fridge. If you have a spare fridge in the garage, that would be a perfect place to do it. First, I would say scrub it with hot soapy water and then disinfect it. If you're gonna do it in your normal fridge that you use for all your other food, really go through it. Make sure there's no moldy strawberries in there. But besides the fridge, all you're gonna need is a sheet tray and some kind of wire wrap. But yeah, let's go. So first we need to prep the duck for aging. I just removed these wingtips. There's not very much meat there and they're gonna go in my stock. Then I'm gonna make 2 cuts as close to the thigh as possible. You wanna leave as much skin on the breast as possible because it's gonna shrink when it ages and then it's gonna shrink even more when you cook it. Then just pop the thighs out of their sockets and then make a cut as close to the backbone as possible. And then that's it, that's the legs removed. And then for the backbone, what I'm gonna do is put my hand firmly on top and then just break it. And then take the tip of your knife and slide it in between the ribs to separate, and then you can follow up and cut through that break. And that's it, super easy. This is the duck crown that we're gonna age. I'm gonna go back to the backbone that we just broke off and remove all of the skin, and that will get rendered for duck fat. If you see any extra skin hanging off the breast, you can go ahead and trim it, but try to leave some overhang. Same thing for the legs. If I see any excess skin, I'll just trim it off and then that will go for rendering duck fat. But otherwise, that's done. And then once you have all your skin trimmed, you can go ahead and just cut it up. It'll make it easier to render once we get it into a pot. So here's the duck that is ready to go into the fridge, ready to age. Carcass and wingtips, which is gonna go for stock. And then here we have our duck legs for confit, and then here we have the skin for rendering. And then you just put it in your fridge uncovered for 7 days to 14 days. There's really no point of doing it less than 7 days. The duck is gonna lose a lot of water content, so it's gonna concentrate the flavor of the duck, and then enzymes are gonna start breaking down the meat, making it more tender. The longer you age it, the more it'll get this kind of like funky, blue cheesy taste, like a dry aged steak. These ducks are about 10 days in, and I am gonna let them go to the full 14 days. But let's start with rendering the duck fat. Just take all the skin, get it into a pot, and add a splash of water just so it doesn't scorch on the bottom as it gets going. And then just place it over medium heat and all that water will evaporate. You'll know it's done when the duck skin is really golden brown and crispy and you see far fewer bubbles. And then that's it. This is your duck fat for general cooking, or it's great for deep frying if you have enough. Duck fat potatoes, legendary. Next, on to the legs. I'm gonna make duck confit. You can cook these any way you want, but this is my favorite way. I have 1 tablespoon of kosher salt per leg, and then just some toasted and lightly crushed herbs and spices. So there's bay leaf, thyme, fennel seed, black pepper, and then just evenly sprinkle that all over the duck legs. And we're gonna throw this in the fridge for 24 hours to let the salt really penetrate the duck legs. And then the next day, we'll just give it a really quick rinse to remove any big chunks that you don't want to eat when you're cooking it. Give them a really good pat dry, and then you can let them air dry for a little bit if you want. And then I'm gonna go straight into a bag. I do cook them sous vide, and the reason I prefer doing it that way is because you need a lot less product to cook it sous vide. So I'm just gonna put like a tablespoon of duck fat in each bag. If you did it a more traditional method, doing it in a pot and then throwing it in the oven, you would need like a quart or more of duck fat to fully submerge them. So yeah, it's less product. I don't need to buy anything extra. It's kind of like a closed circuit. I rendered this duck fat and I can use it right away. And then also the recipe that I landed on for cooking it, I think the texture is much better. Sometimes you get duck confit and it's kind of like mush. It takes longer, but I think it's a far superior product. So these cooked for 24 hours in the water bath. And then if you're not gonna eat them right away, you can plunge them into an ice bath just to cool them down quickly, throw them in the fridge, and this will be good for a few weeks to a month. And then you can also chuck it in the freezer for several months. But when I'm ready to eat it or serve it, I just pop it under the broiler and then get the skin really crispy. It's already a cooked product, so you're just warming it through and getting it crispy. And then I'm just gonna plate it super simply with a salad. And then I made this orange sauce. I posted it short format if you want the recipe for that. But you could also pick the meat and shred it, put it into a croquette, or add it to a super stew like cassoulet. Next, let's make the stock. Now, if you don't have a lot of duck bones, you can supplement it with chicken bones, which is what I'm gonna do here. And you can make kind of like a blended poultry stock. It's still gonna taste very much like duck. So lay out your duck parts, lay out your chicken parts, and then I also have these dry aged duck bones from my last batch, so I'm going to add those in here too. Dry aged duck bones are really good for sauces and stocks. They add such an intense duck flavor, so I'm just gonna cut it up. Doesn't need to be pretty, they're gonna get roasted along with everything else. And then once everything is a super deep brown, we can go ahead and throw it into a pot, cover it with cold water. We're gonna bring this up to a simmer. And after about 30 minutes, you're gonna see all this foam and all this fat come to the top. It's just congealed proteins, but we're gonna go ahead and skim all of that off. You don't want that emulsifying into your stock. It'll make it cloudy, it'll make it taste a little weird. And after 3 hours of simmering and skimming every now and then, I'm gonna come and I'm gonna add my mirepoix and then aromatics, and I'll let it simmer for another 3 hours. I add the mirepoix in the latter half of the simmer because it's easier to skim without it, and then the vegetables don't need that long to impart flavor. When the time is up, I'll go ahead and strain it, and then I'll cool it down, put it into a container, throw it in the fridge, and next day you should have a very gelatinous, jiggly duck stock. And you can store this in the fridge for 1 week or freeze it for 3 months. Sometimes when you buy ducks whole, they package the neck inside the body or in this little bag. I save these for sauces. So I'm gonna get these in a pot and I'm just gonna brown them off. And then I'll toast off some garlic. Once it's nice and golden brown, I'll add some shallots and then I'll saute them until the shallots begin turning translucent. I'll deglaze with apple brandy. This is gonna be an applesauce. Duck and fruit is a classic combination. Once the brandy is almost dry, I'll add the duck stock that we just made, and then I'll bring it up to a simmer. Just like stock, you never want your sauce to be at a rolling boil. A lot of fat and impurities are going to rise up to the top, and you want to skim that off. And I also place my pot slightly off center from the hob, and that'll push all the fat to one side, and it makes it a lot easier to skim. And when I'm done skimming, I'm going to grab a spatula. You can also use a pastry brush dipped in a little bit of water, but I'm going to clean the sides really well. I want all of that worked into my sauce before it burns. After about 40 minutes and your sauce is starting to lightly coat a spoon, it's getting a little viscous, I'm going to peel and core an apple, and then I'm going to chuck those in there. You don't want to add them earlier because it'll break down and it'll turn your nice duck sauce into applesauce. But after another 20 to 30 minutes and it starts to noticeably thicken up, I'm going to strain it into a separate smaller pot. If you finish reducing it with all of that stuff in there, it makes it really hard to skim and it'll cling to all the aromatics and vegetables and you'll lose a little bit. And now with nothing in there, you can give it a really good skim. Sauce work is where you can unleash your inner control freak. And I think this is the hardest part for most people to nail, is the consistency. So what you can do is grab a tray, pour a little bit of your sauce on there, and then just move it around. This is obviously too watery. It just kind of free flows and goes all over the place. So I would probably let this go for another 10 minutes and then check it again. So grab the tray, pour a little bit out. Now it holds its shape. It's nice and shiny. It's nice and thick. This is good for me. Now, if you over reduce your sauce, you can correct it a little bit by adding a splash of unreduced stock, but you don't want to have to do that too many times because you're essentially diluting it. When you're happy with your consistency, you can whisk in some cold butter, and then you can adjust your seasoning with some salt. You can add black pepper if you want. I'm going to adjust the acidity with apple cider vinegar to continue the apple theme, and that's it. That's the sauce. It should be velvety and smooth on your tongue. If it's a little bit tacky, or it makes your mouth feel sticky, it's probably a little bit over reduced. You can just adjust it. Now, I'm gonna show you 2 different ways that you can cook your dry aged duck breasts. The first one involves removing the breast from the bone first. So there's a bone straight down the center in the middle of the 2 breasts, and then up here at the top is the collarbone. So if you imagine it like a Y. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make 2 cuts on either side of that keel or that bone down the center. And then I'm gonna take the tip of my knife and I'm going to find the wishbone or the collarbone, and I'm just gonna trace that too. And once you've made your first 2 cuts, kind of like guidelines, you can take the tip of your knife and I just drag it across the ribs to try to stay as close to the bone as possible and preserve as much flesh as possible. And then just repeat it on the other side, and that's it. And then once I have my breast, I'm gonna remove the tender. It usually just pops off when you're cooking it, and it cooks faster than the rest of the duck anyways. And I'm gonna remove any silver skin. Just get your knife underneath and slide it, and that's it. That's 1 clean duck breast ready to be cooked. So now I'm gonna show you how to pan sear it. So I'm gonna season the flesh side only with salt. You can add whatever spices you want, but just do it on the flesh side. If you do it on the skin, it's just gonna fall off or burn. I'm gonna place the duck into a cold pan. Just give it a gentle press down to make sure everything is touching. And then I'm going to place the heat on medium low, and after a couple of minutes you're going to see a lot of fat start to render out. If it becomes too much fat, you can drain it off. You don't want to deep fry it, but I'm going to leave a fair amount in there because I'm going to start basting it with the duck fat. And I like my duck medium, so just rosy pink. So I'm going to keep basting it until it reaches around 132, 133 Fahrenheit, and then I'm going to flip it, give it a little kiss on the underside, and then I'm going to rest it really well. As it rests, it's going to carry over and keep cooking, and it'll reach closer to 140 Fahrenheit, which is medium. After your 10-minute rest, you can slice it and then serve it with your sauce or your sides or whatever you're going to eat it with. But that's seared duck breast. The next way I'm going to cook it is to cook it whole. This is great for presentation, special occasions, holidays, stuff like that, or back in the restaurant
want, we would cook them whole like this for high volume. It's a lot easier than doing a whole bunch of seared duck breasts. So I'm just brushing it with a very thin layer of honey. You don't want to do too much honey because it'll drip and it'll make all your spices that you're going to add right now fall off. So right now I'm sprinkling over cumin, coriander, black pepper, and a little bit of flaky salt. And once it has even coverage, I'm gonna throw in my thermometer. I recommend going from the tip of the breast up towards the middle of the breast. You can give it a little wiggle and try to feel that you're dead center, but then just throw it into the oven and cook to your desired doneness. Again, I like my duck medium. I'm gonna post times and temperatures and recipes and all that stuff on my blog. I'll post the link in the description. Also, my blog doesn't have advertisements. It's not monetized. There's no essays for you to read. It's just recipes. But after a really long hard rest, you can carve the duck exactly how we broke it down earlier, and then you can slice it up any which way you want, serve it family style, individual plates, whatever. But make sure you save those bones because you can add those to stock. Just scrape off any honey or spices or stuff like that and chuck it in the freezer.
Thank you guys for watching all the way until the end if you're still here. If you like the video, please leave a thumbs up. It really does help. And I'll see you next time.